From KVUE News in Austin, you're watching Texas This Week with Ashley Goodo.
Good Sunday morning. The Texas Education Agency is planning to take over the largest school district in the state. That's where we'll start with the 3 things you need to know in Texas politics. After a years-long fight that included a legal battle, the TEA announced this week it will take over Houston ISD in June, replacing the Board of Trustees, which is elected by the voters, and the superintendent with a state-appointed board of managers. Back in 2019, a TEA report showed a Houston high school was underperforming for the 5th year in a row. By law, the TEA had to shut down that campus or take over the district, and the state agency chose the latter. Now, since that time, TEA reports show Houston schools have improved, but agency leaders say the law is the law. TEA Commissioner Mike Morath will decide how long the state board will stay in place. On Friday, the Third Court of Appeals ruled the Public Utility Commission overstepped its authority when it raised the price of electricity to the maximum allowed and kept it at that rate during the 2021 winter storm. An independent company said the PUC and ERCOT overcharged retail electricity providers by $16 billion. All of the PUC and ERCOT leaders who were in charge during the storm have since been fired or resigned. And in 2021, the Texas Senate passed a bill to stop electric companies from passing those charges on to customers, but the legislation died in the House. It's unclear what the ruling means going forward, but Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick is taking it as a win, releasing a statement Friday saying in part, quote, "We were right. Texas electric utility customers got the short end of the stick." It's also worth noting the Senate passed its version of the supplemental budget on Wednesday, and it includes roughly $3.9 billion to pay for the monthly charges electric companies are passing on to Texans for recovery from the 2021 winter storm. That bill is up for a hearing in the House on Monday. Texas officially has a new Secretary of State. The Texas Senate unanimously approved Governor Greg Abbott's appointment of former State Senator Jane Nelson as Secretary of State on Wednesday. Secretary Nelson served in the Senate for 30 years and planned to retire at the end of the 2021 session, but the governor had other plans. This is the first time the Senate has approved one of the governor's appointments to the position since 2017. Increasing reliability of the Texas power grid is a top priority for lawmakers this session, and one key component of energy is the Texas oil and gas industry. This week, Texas Monthly published a story about 2 elected officials that have a great deal of power and influence over oil and gas, and how much money they're making off the industry they help regulate. State Representative Tom Craddick and his daughter, Christi Craddick, chair of the Texas Railroad Commission. Russell Gold, senior editor at Texas Monthly, joined me to talk about what he found. First tell us what sparked you to do this investigation and this story.
No, that's a great question. I was out in West Texas. I was reporting on a totally different story, and I drove by an old oil well, and the rancher I was with happened to say to me, "Hey, you won't believe who's got a small little 0.5% interest in that well." I said, "Who?" And I was told Tom Craddick. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I didn't know that the former Speaker of the House owned mineral, royalty interest in different parts of the state. So I started looking to see how much he owned, and I just kept coming across dozens and dozens of different wells that he had interest in, and I ended up, him and his family, gathering about 700 different wells across the state.
And not only that is what you uncovered, you found some interesting things about the money that he's making with these wells. Talk to us about that.
Well, this was really the most fascinating part of it. We looked at how much money Tom Craddick and his daughter Christi Craddick, who's one of the top is the top oil and gas regulator in the state of Texas, how much they earned last year. And we were able to determine they made about $10 million from their royalty interest. So we have here in Texas is a situation where two of our elected officials who are regulating this industry are also making considerable money from this industry.
The fact that they have these interests, that this is their company, that this is how they make their money, it's not illegal, right?
Well, that's the fascinating thing. You're absolutely right. It's not illegal to own this. But one of the things we discovered is that the way the state of Texas requires our elected officials to disclose what they have an interest in, all they have to do is disclose, well, we were getting more than $46,000 from a company. Well, in one case, we found that they were getting almost $2 million from their interest in wells from this company. And it was impossible to know. There's no way that a voter would know about this information. It took us weeks of just digging through county courthouse records to put this all together. So there was a conflict of interest at the heart of regulating and serving for the public, as well as looking after the family financial interest. And at Texas Monthly, we really just wanted to get this out there and to explain to people that some of our elected officials are both looking out for the public interest, but also for their own very substantial financial interests.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because that, one might argue, is the case with most of the lawmakers. Nearly all of them have jobs, whether they're attorneys or they're doctors. And so they are experts in those fields, and they're put in committees where they help create laws about those fields. And it does impact them in the day-to-day. How do you feel, though, that this is different?
Well, if you were a regulator here in Texas and you regulated the electrical grid as part of the Public Utility Commission, we as a state have said, you have to get rid of all your electricity holdings. There's just too much money involved. We're talking billion-dollar markets. If you're in Oklahoma and you're regulating the oil and gas industry up there, once again, you have to get rid of all your interest in the oil and gas industry, because this is not about a lawyer who might practice medical malpractice sitting on a committee. There's billions of dollars at stake. But if you're regulating the oil and gas industry here in Texas, the rules don't apply. And so we've created a situation which allows this family to be earning millions of dollars a year. And this, this is 2022 where we tracked down that they were making $10 million. That was not an unusual year. They're earning that kind of money year after year. It's a very unique type of situation, going well beyond the citizen legislator that we have. This is not someone who is a rancher sitting on the agriculture committee. This is someone who's sitting and making decisions about one of the most important industries in the state of Texas, which is generating literally billions of dollars of cash and revenue and taxes every year.
You know, when you asked the Craddicks about this, about whether or not there was a conflict of interest, what did they have to say?
You know, their response, great question. Their response really was, we follow all the letters of the law in terms of disclosing our interests, and we look out for the best interest of the oil and gas industry in Texas. And while that's true, one of the things that we reported is that one of the very small number of bills that Representative Craddick has authored last session and this session was a bill that would directly impact his financial holdings. It has to do with what are called washouts and overriding royalty interest. That bill was vetoed by the governor 2 years ago, and he brought it back up. I think that the public and the electorate deserves to know that he's pushing bills that would have a very direct impact on his family's finances.
You can find a link to Russell's story at KVUE.com. Now it is time for My Bill of the Week, the Texas This Week segment where I highlight different pieces of legislation that catch my eye. If you haven't heard, Texas lawmakers have a lot more money than usual to spend this session. $32.7 billion more, to be exact. More money than some states have in their entire budgets. That's what Texas has for extras. So during this record time of inflation, a lot of lawmakers say they should give at least some of that money back to you and I, the taxpayers. And there are a lot of proposals out there about how to do that. So let's talk about one of those ideas, or really three ideas, from Round Rock Democrat State Representative James Tallarico. He's proposing three bills that he says will give real help to working Texans. House Bill 4231 would suspend all toll road fees for 1 year. The state would pick up your tab. House Bill 4243 would waive all personal vehicle registration and inspection fees for 1 year. Again, the state of Texas would pay for it. And HB 4425 would create a tax-free weekend on essential household goods. Think cleaning supplies, clothes, baby items. Tallarico says all three of these bills would only use up about 4% of that $32.7 billion surplus, leaving the state with plenty of surplus money to use for other things and Texans with some extra money in their bank accounts in 2024. Of course, we'll be watching to see how far these bills make it.